So now it's my pleasure to introduce my boss, our Associate Provost, Co-operative and Experiential Education, Dr. Norah McRae. Many of you have met Norah and are familiar with her work. Certainly when she came to the University of Waterloo in the fall of 2018, she was already known nationally and internationally as a leader in cooperative and experiential education. Her work in this field spans more than 20 years, over which time she has led strategic program development and research on student engagement, community-engaged learning, and intercultural competency development. Today, Norah will be presenting a call to action, developing talent for a complex future. She'll be reviewing some of the great work that has happened recently at Waterloo in support of experiential learning, along with highlighting connections between our work and the university's new strategic plan. She'll also be setting the context for our work by discussing some of what's been happening provincially and nationally related to experiential learning. Please join me in welcoming Norah.
Well, good morning, everyone. What a pleasure to be here this morning and to see so many people here as well. I'm about to embark on a full day of further collaboration and growing our community around experiential learning. Seems to me that last year when we were doing something, it was February-ish as well, wasn't it, last year when the Institute was? I think it was one of my first opportunities to drive to the Waterloo Inn in a full-on blizzard. That was super exciting. And in fact, I didn't even recognize I was driving by the Waterloo Inn as I went blowing past it and had to turn around, and it was all very exciting. So even though it's a little chilly out today, it's a lovely day, and we don't have those challenges at all. So what I've entitled this presentation, and thanks for the intro, Anne, and also for the great overview of what we're going to accomplish today, but I thought, well, here we are. We're 150 strong today, around that with registrations. We've had a number of these events over the course of the last couple of years. We're growing the community of practice, that's evident, and that's wonderful. We've, in the world of co-op and experiential education, we've been doing some work internationally around building this work and looking at and working with our colleagues in other parts of the world. And we've also spent some time this last year, the colleagues at WatCase, and we've got Judine, who's the director of WatCase here, and Dana, who's here. I don't know if Dave is here. Is Dave here? Who worked to develop our white paper on a quality work-integrated learning framework that we're using now extensively throughout the whole portfolio of cooperative and experiential education. Now, many of you have already seen this framework, but I thought before I got into the depth of my presentation, because it really builds off the concepts within this framework, I would just give a little bit of an overview of what this quality work-integrated learning framework is, because for us, if you're not going to do this work coming from a place of quality, then really what's the point? So, how many in the room have already seen this? Okay, very good. So I do not need to spend too much time at all. So very quickly, when we're thinking about this work, and specifically experiential learning or work-integrated learning, where there's a connection to community or an employer, there's an external connection, there are 5 key stakeholders. So government is interested, the institution has a stake in it, the educator has a stake, the student, and either the employer or the host organization. So the 5 stakeholders is an important place to start, because each of those stakeholders has different aims, different goals, different reasons for being engaged in this work. And in order to do a good job, it's really important, first of all, to have a really clear sense of what your own aims are, depending on where you are as a stakeholder, and what the aims are of those who you need to bring on board to support your work. So it's a good idea to understand why the institution might care, or why employers or organizations or the community might care. That is part of building the perspective around this work more wholesomely. So within each of those stakeholders, they each have their own aims or their own goals, and in order to achieve those goals, they need to undertake certain actions. Now, the way we have conceptualized these actions is using the model PAIR, P-E-A-R. Yeah. P for pedagogy. So there needs to be some pedagogy that's connected to this work. usually before, during, and after each of these experiences. It has to be connected to curriculum. There needs to be a pedagogical connection. The experiences have to be meaningful and substantial and of a quality nature themselves, and situated in such a way that it's a supportive learning environment. Because that's the whole point with experiential learning or work-integrated learning, that it's a learning experience, and it needs to be situated in such a way that that learning can happen in a positive way. The A stands for assessment. That's the assessing the learning that's happening accordingly, and that will vary according to what the educational goals or pedagogical goals are of the program, or there might be some higher level goals that might be in place. And I'll talk a little bit about the ones that we have established for co-op and experiential and work-integrated learning. And the R is reflection. Any kind of experiential learning, whatever you call it, wherever it happens, there has to be meaningful and ongoing reflection. Experience without reflection doesn't lead to learning, and so being able to support that in a systematic way throughout the experience is a really important component. So PAIR, P-E-A-R, those are the underpinnings for all the actions when we think about the work that we're doing, so that we don't forget anything important as we're setting up our programs and thinking about how to build them. And then finally, there's the final outer ring is that of achievements. In order to reach the goals that you have by undertaking the actions that one is doing in whatever program it is, you need to be measuring results and seeing whether you're actually achieving your results. To know whether there's any progress being made, the program is being successful, and it's heading in the direction that you want it to head. So that's the AAA, aims, actions, and achievements. And then the star in the center really indicates that it's an iterative process. There should be continuous improvement. So whatever those achievements are, however you're measuring those results, you're feeding those back into the system, you're thinking about how to make continuous improvement and program improvements. So you're articulating aims, accomplishing actions, assessing achievements, and you've got quality improvement processes, and that's the WIL framework. What's been Wattcase published this work. If you want to read the full white paper, it's on the Wattcase website. Published it last November, so a year ago November, and it's had a lot of play. So we've presented it at provincial, national, and international contexts. And Fannin and I did an international institute in Africa, and we used this framework to structure the learning in the institute around, which provided us with a great way to structure it. I was recently involved in an academic review of a program in Ireland, and I actually used this structure to do the academic review of the program. So we've been playing with it in a number of different ways, both at a specific experiential level, more at a program level, and at an institutional level. So the other thing that's super exciting that's happened this last year is, of course, the strategic plan for the University of Waterloo. This shouldn't be news to anybody. There are 3 big themes in the strategic plan: developing talent for a complex future, advancing research for global impact, and strengthening sustainable and diverse communities. So those are the 3 big themes for 2020 to 2025. Within those themes, there are also 7 signature commitments. Can anyone tell me what they are? That's okay. That was kind of a sort of a joke. The 7 signature commitments. So here they are, for those who haven't committed them to memory. The first one is build on our global leadership in cooperative education to provide every undergraduate and graduate student with expanded options in experiential learning. So there are a couple of things in there that might get our attention. First, and this is part of why I have entitled this keynote a call to action, because this is in our strategic plan now, and part of the question here that I hope you'll all be considering throughout the day is how do we work collectively together around achieving some of these. So first of all, we have lots going on in the undergraduate space, as certainly in our unit, 72% of all undergraduate students are engaged in co-op. The other 28% have the option for the EDGE program. And then, of course, there are a number of other experiences going on. So lots, quite successfully in the undergraduate space, not so much in the graduate space, so that provides us with an additional challenge. So there is work in the graduate space, but it's not all graduate students having access necessarily, or if they do, it's hard to tell. The second signature commitment, empowering students to leverage diverse learning experiences by creating more flexible learning pathways. So one might argue that experiential learning in and of itself is a diverse learning experience, actually, which it is. How do we play with the concept of flexible learning pathways, and how does it fit within that? Be a global powerhouse for commercializing research, developing new enterprises, and supporting business growth. And how does our work around experiential feed into that signature commitment? Because I believe it can and does. Leverage Waterloo's vast employer network and academic strengths to deliver a dynamic framework for learning integrated work for professionals seeking to thrive and lead. So this is about the lifelong learning space. How does the work we're doing now with our students and the expertise we have around experiential learning, work integrated learning, how might that play for professionals who are wanting to access some lifelong learning programming? Or does it? What's the connection there? And certainly there's some thinking going on about that. So imagine you are, I think I read the other day that the half-life of an engineering degree is 3 years, 4 years. So what happens when you're an engineer and you're out there and say you're 5, 6, 7 years into your career and you would like some more upskilling, reskilling as they call it, you want to engage somehow. Maybe you were a co-op student at Waterloo and you're very familiar with that type of learning. Work integrated learning. What does that look like when you flip that? And what might we do in the programs that we're developing here to think about that in a different way? Align our research strengths deliberately with important global challenges. And I think certainly when we're talking about a complex future, it doesn't take much imagination to realize what some of these important global challenges are. We're facing right away, not necessarily that far into the future. Lead globally and nationally at the interface of society, health, and technology. And finally, create a sustainable, supportive environment for living, learning, working, and discovery that is worthy of our students and university community. So those are the 7 signature commitments, and of course in the strategic plan there are many other goals and outcomes that are being identified and articulated right now as we figure out how we're going to do this over the next 5 years. But I thought it would be a good place to start for this community, thinking about the important and powerful work that you're doing, how it will align with the signature commitments and the goals of the university. So the University of Waterloo isn't the only place thinking about experiential learning and work integrated learning. We have a provincial government that has the SMA3 process where they're looking explicitly at outcomes from universities and around metrics to determine funding formulas, for example. Well, funding formulas. And many of those metrics do relate to our work. Experiential learning explicitly, students who are graduating with some kind of experiential learning in their program, that kind of thing. So obviously, the provincial government is deeply interested in how universities are preparing their students for complex futures, and they do see one of those mechanisms being experiential learning opportunities. The Government of Canada is also very interested in this work. You may have heard about some of the funding that's been available to specifically work integrated learning. We're getting close to $1 billion that the federal government has now been investing in this work. Much of that is around providing employers with subsidies in order to hire students in work integrated learning. And there are other opportunities that we hope to see soon that we might be able to access funds in some way to also help elevate and bring forward our work. So you have a political landscape, both provincially and federally, which is keenly interested in how universities are responding to the skills gap or the future of work, whatever that seems to look like or what they're concerned about. And our work here is really fundamental to part of how the university would respond to that. So, how are we going to do this? And what I'd like to speak about is really very specifically more so how my unit, Cooperative and Experiential Education, is wrapping our heads around this context and what we're thinking about doing and how we might proceed. So first of all, we also developed a vision and mission statement for the whole portfolio. And as you know, the portfolio under Co-op and Experiential is the Cooperative Education Program, the Center for Career Action, WATPD and EDGE, WATCASE, and a unit called CEE Services, which is really the operational backbone that pulls the whole thing together and makes it all work seemingly effortlessly. So that's our portfolio. And the portfolio was created, not that long ago. It's fairly new. And part of our strategy is thinking about, we have all of these powerhouses within this portfolio. How do we pull this together? How do we bring this portfolio and showcase the power of that portfolio in light of a new strategic plan that the university has identified or articulated? And so what we did over the course of last year collectively was develop our own vision and mission statement and value statements, which align with the University of Waterloo's vision and mission and strategic plan, so that we are nestled very, very congruently within that. So our vision is connecting imagination and impact for a better world through global leadership in cooperative and career education, experiential and work-integrated learning. Our mission: by developing talent for a complex future, advancing research and strengthening Waterloo's diverse communities, we will equip and empower learners for the future of work and lifelong learning. So you can see how our vision and mission encapsulates the entire portfolio. And we, of course, we adhere to the similar values of the University of Waterloo, so curiosity, courage, engagement, and belonging. Now what I want to do is talk about using that pair formula that I mentioned already, and how that is helping us structure our approach to this challenge as we respond to this call to action. So if we think about pedagogy and how does that apply, of course we're looking at how we can develop more experiential co-op and work-integrated learning courses and programs, and this is an example of trying to support that amongst everyone else's work. We are also looking at developing curriculum that prepares students for complex futures. Much of that is happening in the academic courses and programs already, but also what in the curriculum that we offer through WATPD, through the Center for Career Action, what might that look like? What is it that we need to be thinking about, most specifically around the future of work and complex futures? We want to develop curriculum that not only strengthens employability, we have tremendous strength in that space already, and the outcomes from our work are clear when you look at graduate outcomes and how employable our graduates are as a result of the co-op program. So employability, we have a lot of strength and depth in, but also this university is so well known and has such leadership in entrepreneurship that's another area to be explicit around, because in the future of work and complex futures, increasingly students and graduates will need to be creating their own employment, developing their own opportunities, functioning in a gig economy, all of that kind of thing. There are industries that we may be preparing them for today may not exist in 5 years, so they really have to have that entrepreneurial and innovative mindset to navigate and succeed. Curriculum that strengthens the understanding of personal values. In a world that's very complex and shifting rapidly and very challenging and confronting on many, many levels, people need to be really grounded in their values, understand who they are, what they stand for, and why that's important. Because the winds of change can blow hard, and if you're not really stable in that regard, that can be a very difficult place to navigate. So this concept of personal values and understanding, for a person to be able to understand what that means for them as they make their own journey, is really critical. We are also wanting to develop curriculum that helps students better understand their talents. It will increasingly be the case in the future of work that you can't necessarily say, if you study this, you'll get this job and everything will be fine. We know, lots of research is showing that what is needed is a robust set of talents which allow people to navigate all sorts of different work and employability or entrepreneurship settings that are not necessarily a linear connection to what they've studied and what might have been a career path in the past. So getting to the heart of those talents and understanding what those are and being able to identify how to develop them and how to talk about them and how to leverage them and transfer them to a range of different contexts is going to be a really important part of helping our students navigate complex futures. And we're also very interested in looking at developing curriculum about the Sustainable Development Goals. If we want to prepare our students for a complex future, and if, as it says in the strategic plan, we want our students and our graduates and our work to be related to solving some of the world's big challenges, well, there they are. And so the SDG goals, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, encompass anything that anyone is studying on this campus, any kind of work opportunity that they might have or care to have, and it frames thinking about careers and employability and entrepreneurship around a backdrop of some of the world's biggest challenges. Now, some might say, that's very presumptuous. How can we assume that students will care about this? And I think that it is presumptuous, but I think they need to care about it. And I think it's our job to help them think about it. Maybe they don't take it on board, maybe they don't do anything with it, but our obligation as a Center for Higher Education and Learning is at least identifying that these are the world's biggest challenges, as have been identified by lots and lots of people. The Government of Canada has signed on to making progress towards these. We host the SDN, the network on campus for Canada to measure outcomes against these. So the university has identified that this is an important framework. And whether that means that every single student is going to be tackling poverty, no, probably not. But they can probably find themselves in decent work and economic growth, or industry innovation and infrastructure, maybe sustainable cities and communities. And I think it's very important that we at least frame our work around thinking about these bigger issues, because we're going to have to rely on these students and graduates to help us get out of the mess that we are in. Okay, so that was the P. Now I'm moving on to E for experience. So in order to meet some of these challenges, of course, we need to expand the experiential offerings for undergraduate students. So currently, the mapping work that was done for experiential courses using the MCU definition of what experiential means has identified 85 courses across the undergraduate curriculum. If we don't limit to the MCU definitions, then of course the number of courses are much, much more. But that's our current state, little snapshot state. We do need to be thinking about how are we going to expand experiential for graduate students, and what is that going to look like? Expanding co-op programs, expanding the EDGE program. So here are some mechanisms around the experience part of the pair that we can be thinking about and that we're thinking about, and how we're going to do it, how are we going to resource it, how are we going to support that, how are we going to make it all happen within our current infrastructure that we have, which does provide us with a fabulously strong foundation in order to do this work, but also how to do it in a quality way. We are not just after a whole bunch more. We want to make sure that whatever growth happens in a quality way, in a way that's going to give us the outcomes we want. And the outcomes are not just a whole bunch of more students running around doing stuff. The outcomes is that they understand things more deeply and that they have more agency to make the changes that we want them to make. That's the whole point around experiential education. So, quality, I keep coming back to that. A is for assessment. And in our world, co-op and experiential ed, our portfolio, we are going to be using what we've called a Future Ready Talent Framework as a mechanism to assess and help students assess talents as they relate to the future of work and learning. So many of you have probably already heard about our Future Ready Talent Framework. I'll give just a quick snapshot of it, and then just before lunch, Judine will be running a session on the Future Ready Talent Framework in more detail that you can learn more. But after considerable research and engaging with over 2,200 individuals, that's employers and students and faculty and others, we first looked at a whole range of different competency frameworks against what the future of work literature was saying to us. And also within the backdrop of the University of Waterloo and our culture and what's important to us. What we identified were 4 big buckets that students needed to expand and transfer expertise, They needed to develop self, build relationships, design and deliver solutions. And within those buckets, there are three talents. So for expanding and transferring expertise, those talents are information and data literacy, technological agility, context-specific knowledge and skills. Within the bucket of developing self, self-assessment, self-management, lifelong learning, and career development. Within the bucket of building relationships, communication, collaboration, and intercultural effectiveness. And within the bucket of designing and delivering solutions, critical thinking, innovation mindset, and implementation. So this is our future-ready talent framework. And as I said, Judine can provide more information on that, but our plan is for our co-op programs and other forms of experiences that are within our portfolio, we are going to start using this as a way for students to assess their talent development over the course of their co-op work terms and other experiences. And why this is important for developing students for a complex future is then we're starting to be much more intentional with students all the way through their program around developing these things that we think are going to help arm them for the future of work and for complex futures. Okay, the final component in PAIR is reflection. So we also have many reflective devices that we use already through our WAPD program, through the Center for Career Action on co-op. There's a lot of reflection that does happen, but we do want to be more intentional around that reflection as it relates to students identifying and thinking about their values, thinking about their talents that I've just mentioned, thinking about their employability or entrepreneurial pathways, however that's going to look for them, and thinking about what the world needs, using the UN SDGs as a backdrop for starting to think about that and contemplate that. Because we believe that students who are able to and supported in doing this deep thinking about not only their values, their talents, their employability, and the future needs of the world, but the intersection of those four things, for them provides a tremendous amount of purpose clarity. And why is that important? Because if someone is very clear on what it is they value and how they're going to support themselves and what difference they can make in the world and the talents and capabilities they have, when they're clear about that, that's hugely motivational and provides the fuel which allows for purpose empowerment, which is what we want. We want to be graduating talent that is able to handle a complex future, that's resilient and adaptable, that is employable and entrepreneurial, and that's purposeful. Because ultimately, and we know this already, our students already are very capable, and they contribute hugely to organizations all over the world. And there was the Deloitte study that it showed that for every dollar an employer spent on a student's salary, they got $2 worth of economic contribution from that student. So we know, certainly through the co-op program, that our students are hugely effective in contributing. But what we will need them to be as well, and enable them to be and empower them to be, are disruptive innovators. Because the future of work is going to require that constant ability to be innovating and disrupting, but in a way that's constructive and useful, as organizations into which these students are graduating are going to be challenged all the time with what the future is presenting to them. So the call to action here is to develop talent that's ready for a complex future, but I would also add to that, let's ensure that that talent is sustainable. And by that, I mean sustainable in the broadest sense, that our students and graduates are equipped to manage themselves throughout their lifetime and their careers, so that they'll be sustainably future ready, both personally as individuals and professionally, wherever they end up, and that they'll be doing that with a mindset that also enables them to contribute to a sustainable complex future within the many, many diverse communities that they will find themselves in.